All right, today we are diving into a parasitic disease that is honestly a true medical mystery. It's this wild story about two tapeworms. They're practically twins, but they behave in completely different ways once they get inside a human. One can just hang out for decades, while the other, it attacks with the ferocity of cancer.
So let me just ask you this. What if a parasite could live inside you totally undetected for 50 years? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But believe it or not, it's the startling reality of one of the parasites we're going to be looking at today.
Okay, so here's what we've got on tap. We'll start with the basics of this crazy decades-long parasite, and we'll trace how it gets from animals to us. Then, we'll meet our two main players, the nicer, quiet cyst and the really aggressive, cancer-like invader. And finally, we'll look at how doctors actually fight back.
So the condition is called Echinococcis. It's an infection that comes from a tiny tapeworm. But here's the really fascinating part. This one name actually covers two diseases with, and I mean this, vastly different personalities.
So at its core, Echinococcis is an infection from a tapeworm that causes these cysts to grow in your organs, usually the liver. But trust me, that simple definition barely even scratches the surface of this whole complicated story.
So you might be wondering, how in the world does a tapeworm end up creating cysts inside a person? Well, both types share the same origin story. It's a complex life cycle that passes between predators and their prey.
Okay, so it all starts with what scientists call definitive hosts. Think animals like dogs or foxes that carry the adult tapeworm. They shed these microscopic eggs in their poop. Then an intermediate host, like a sheep, comes along and eats some contaminated grass, and these cysts start to grow in its organs. The cycle completes when a predator, eats those infected organs. So, where do we fit into all this? Well, we're basically accidental hosts. We just stumble into the cycle, and the good news is, once we're infected, we can't pass it on. The cycle breaks with us.
And the ways we can get infected are honestly surprisingly common. It could be as simple as petting an infected dog and then touching your mouth without thinking. Or maybe from eating unwashed wild berries, drinking contaminated water, or even just doing some gardening in tainted soil. Seriously, all it takes is accidentally swallowing one of those microscopic eggs, and the infection can start.
And this is where we meet the two characters at the very heart of our story. First up, you've got cystic echinococcosis, or CE. We're going to call this one the quiet lodger. And get this, it can incubate for up to 50 years. Its counterpart is alveolar echinococcosis, or AE, the aggressive imposter. And as you can see, its prognosis is really poor if it's left untreated.
All right, let's start with the, let's say, nicer of the two. C, the quiet lodger. This is the form of the disease that can go completely unnoticed for decades. I mean, many patients show absolutely no symptoms at all. 50 years. Just let that sink in for a second. A person could get infected as a kid and not show a single symptom until they're retired. The cyst just sits there, usually in the liver, growing at this incredibly slow pace. It's wild.
Now, on an ultrasound, this cyst has a really distinct look. It's usually this single, smooth circle. Sometimes it has smaller daughter cysts floating around inside the main one. And doctors also look for this classic water lily sign. It's pretty cool, actually. It happens when part of the inner membrane detaches and just floats there, looking a lot like a lily pad on water. Okay, now let's do a complete 180 and talk about the other personality, the aggressive imposter, AE. This is a completely different beast. While its cousin is happy just being a quiet lodger, AE is a destructive invader right from the very start. The defining feature of ApoE, the thing that makes it so terrifying, is its behavior. It acts just like a malignant tumor. It doesn't form a nice, need-contained cyst. Nope. Instead, it infiltrates and spreads through the liver, destroying tissue and invading whatever is nearby. It is, for all intents and purposes, a parasite that perfectly mimics cancer. And this number right here, this tells you everything you need to know about how serious this is. If it's left untreated, the mortality rate for AE is over 90% within 10 years. This is no quiet lodger. This is a lethal invader. So now, compare the ultrasound of AE to the one we saw before. See? There are no smooth walls here. Instead, what you see are these irregular, poorly defined margins. It makes it incredibly difficult to tell it apart from an actual cancerous tumor. It often shows signs that it's infiltrating nearby tissue and even has necrosis. That's dead tissue, right at its core.
So, to put it really simply, the key difference is this.
CE, the lodger, is like a contained water balloon. Smooth, round, it keeps to itself. AE, the invader, is like a cancer. Irregular, infiltrative, and destructive. And this fundamental difference, as you can imagine, determines the entire approach to how you treat.
So, you're a doctor, and you're facing two completely different threats that go by the same name. How do you fight back? Well, the strategies have to be precisely tailored to which parasite you're actually dealing with.
Diagnosis usually kicks off with a combination of two things: imaging and something called serology, which are basically blood tests that look for specific antibodies your body makes to fight the parasite. But as we've already seen, imaging like an ultrasound is absolutely key because it gives you that first big visual clue to tell the quiet lodger apart from the aggressive imposter.
For the nicer cyst, CE, doctors have this kind of ladder of options. They start with the least invasive. For small, inactive cysts, they might just decide to observe it, just watch and wait. For others, medication can sometimes shrink it or kill it. Then there's a minimally invasive procedure called PAIR, where they can actually puncture and drain the cyst. And then, at the top of the ladder, full surgery is reserved for the biggest or most complicated cases.
But, and this is a huge but, there's a major risk. Any procedure that punctures that CE cyst is incredibly delicate. If that thing ruptures, the fluid inside can cause a massive allergic reaction called anaphylactic shock. And even worse, the spilled contents can seed new cysts, essentially planting them in other parts of the body. It's a huge deal.
Now for AE, the cancer mimic, there's no ladder of gentle options. The approach has to be just as aggressive as the parasite itself. The goal is the complete surgical removal of the mass, followed by at least 2 years of powerful medication to hunt down any parasitic cells that might be left behind.
And the fight doesn't just stop with treatment. Not even close. Long-term monitoring is absolutely essential. As you can see here, patients with the calmer CE cyst need follow-ups for about 5 years to watch for any relapse. But for the aggressive AE, that monitoring period is at least 10 years, and often it's for the rest of their lives.
So if there's one single thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Echinococcis is not one disease. It's a tale of two parasites, a quiet lodger that can often be managed, and an aggressive imposter that has to be fought like cancer. Recognizing the difference isn't just important, it is everything.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? If a simple microscopic tapeworm egg can evolve to create a structure that so perfectly mimics a harmless cyst in one case and a malignant tumor in another, it really makes you wonder, what other incredible hidden mimics might be out there in the natural world, just waiting to be discovered?